Hey everyone, Arthur here. We are in part 6 of the 360 coverage now. Check out the other parts too if you haven't yet, and stay tuned for a lot more after this. On future videos I plan on covering region-free Xbox 360 games, OG Xbox games, Kinect games, physical-only games, return to the DLCs with at least one more video, as well as to cover the 2 remaining sales that Xbox has already announced, like I did in part 5. So since the last video covered a whole bunch of non-backwards compatible games on sale, I will finish that topic in this here part 6, which I will split into 2, 6A and 6B. And remember that right now you should not buy any games in the 360 store, unlike me, who had to buy almost all of these like a chump to make this video. And that's because Xbox has confirmed that they will be adding more games to the discounted prices in 2 waves, one in June 18th and another in July 16th, and I'll cover both when they happen, so stay tuned. So in this video, take note of the games you want, but you should hold off on actually buying them right now, because anything can happen. Some of these can go on sale. These non-backwards compatible games are pretty interesting because many of them have been underrated, some very drastically so, and I find these as perfect games to cover here. So let's see what we've dug up this time from the depths of the void. Welcome to the channel. This is From the Void. The first one this time is a great example of what I was talking about. This does so much ass kicking. It's a rare kind of game nowadays, and of course deserves to be much more well known. I mean, come on, look at it. We're talking about Renegade Ops. Dude, hell yeah. This is a top-down twin-stick shooter where you drive a fully loaded vehicle with upgradable machine guns, secondary weapons like flamethrowers and rocket launchers, and even a special skill that varies between each character. The gameplay is fluid and intense. Missions will frequently require you to reach a target and take them down fast, so your driving skills with the nitro boost will also be put to the test. There are optional missions too, and to top it all off, many times you will be driving other things like helicopters and huge trucks, which changes the gameplay nicely, and I loved it. Then in between stages, you spend your skill points that you earn by leveling up on upgrading your stuff. It's great. If you like a fast-paced twin-stick shooting action, this is a must-get. Moving on to a crazy and highly divisive game that got really high scores from some, while a few others, like IGN, destroyed the game with scores on the 4 range, which plunged this into the depths of the void of forgetfulness, making it a perfect fit for the channel. This is where I swim. Let's rescue this one from the void, shall we? This is hell yeah, Wrath of the Dead Rabbit. This is a pretty cool game, man. It may be a bit overly edgy in some aspects, and some of the jokes may not land, but who cares? Those are really not the focus of the game. Wrath of the Dead Rabbit is a very different kind of platformer in a rather interesting way. Your objective is to kill the 100 special monsters. Each stage will have a few of them, and by doing so, you open the way forward. There is a strong need to explore and find your way through the pretty big stages. Traversal is often very challenging, with sections on foot where you have to avoid enemies while doing some regular platforming, and sections where you control a crazy blade machine of death with guns attached to it that completely changes the gameplay. This thing is awesome. It jumps higher, drills through crystals and other obstacles, can have all kinds of guns attached like rocket launchers and machine guns to be used to kill the enemies, and each time you do, you will be prompted with a micro game, very similar to WarioWare in this sense, where you will have to think fast and quickly simply do something like mash a button. There are dozens of these minigames, and they all result in wildly amusing monster execution scenes. This goes really well with the whole premise of the game and is a very welcome change of pace. I really like this game, and players mostly agree. You can check Steam ratings of currently 84 and Metacritic player reviews as well, so never mind the IGN critic who pretty much killed the game single-handedly with that review. This game is rather long and entertaining all the way, so we may even justify the apparently high price of $14.99, but do wait for a possible sale before pulling the trigger. Next we have one of the best shoot 'em ups in the 360, which is saying a lot, Under Defeat HD Deluxe. This is a shoot 'em up. If you like those in the slightest, go right ahead, cause it's almost impossible not to like this one. Unless you're not a fan of high difficulty, but I feel like most shmup fans don't have a problem with that, cause this is tough. But it also gives you the tools you need, which is great. You have a pretty powerful machine gun, but it only hits a small area in front of you, so to compensate they give you some pretty cool controls for a shoot 'em up. You can tilt the direction in which your chopper is facing, so you can shoot diagonally in many different angles. You can hold that orientation and move freely. To do so, you need to maneuver your helicopter to that direction while not shooting, so there is a whole strategic movement requirement, which coupled with a lot of bullets in the screen, it's not a bullet hell, but still, this game is really hard, even if you give yourself more lives and options. But definitely a joy to play and great looking graphics. This is definitely a must get for shoot 'em up fans. The only issue is the price, so I'm hoping for a sale on this one. There is a physical, but on the PlayStation 3 only. Now definitely one of the biggest highlights of the bunch, and what a cool mix of first-person shooter and tower defense. This is Sanctum 2. So yeah, we have here a first-person shooter and tower defense mashup that does it in a rather interesting and seamless way too. It doesn't divide the game into two completely different points of view for each part. You are always in first person, and in between waves of demonic creatures, you will have an opening to build turrets and other defensive structures, as well as walls in order to make a maze for the creatures to take longer to reach the core that you have to protect. The difficulty is on point with a great balance that had to be hard to get right because of the two gameplays. Your weapons are surprisingly effective, doing massive damage on enemies, but you are just one person, so the main hurdle will be the intensity of waves, with several dozens of monsters coming in from multiple sides all at once. I really like the creatures' designs, as well as the whole look of the game, including the comic book style of the characters and cutscenes. It is somewhat budget, but really well made. And that's it. There's really nothing else that needs to be said about this game. This is an absolutely kick-ass title, guaranteed fun if you like the two different gameplay types. And even if this one doesn't get a discount, do consider picking it up. Next is the amusing DeathSpank. This is one of the most hilarious and thoroughly enjoyable action adventures in existence. The script and voiceover are superb, with plenty of real funny lines, and even the missions are outlandish. The action is great. You can equip up to 4 weapons at the same time, each assigned to one of the face buttons. Some are melee, others are ranged. This is also a looter style game like Diablo, so you'll find random weapons and gear, and you can change it all on the go. There is also a sequel with more of the same, equally satisfying in every way, but that one has been made available in more recent Xboxes. No idea why the original wasn't, as they have completely different stories, with the sequel offering a continuation and even expecting the player to have played the previous one. The sequel also has a DLC, which I covered in a previous video. Check that out for dozens of games with DLCs worth getting. But yeah man, DeathSpank, a great game, very well received, so check it out. Next is a wildly imaginative and delightful RPG with a lot of important information to talk about, so even if you know about this, stick around. Eternal Sonata. This is magnificent. I really enjoyed Eternal Sonata. It's also very eccentric, and reducing it to words is hard to make it justice. The description will sound outlandish and maybe off-putting, but playing it doesn't feel off-putting at all. This game centers around the famous 19th century composer Frédéric Chopin, anime Frédéric Chopin no less, who is suffering from a terminal illness and fever dreaming about a whole new reality. And that's the game. You are inside his dream reality, controlling several characters that are figments of his imagination, including Chopin himself. And whoever is close to dying in this world has magical powers. It sounds crazy, but the game makes very good sense of it all. Things are often musically themed here too, so you're always reminded that this is a dream, which contrasts in a very interesting way to this fully realized world full of amazing details, which is more and more rare in RPGs nowadays, and an absolute treasure in my opinion. Not only are the locations beautifully detailed and exploration is highly incentivized, but in the story beats the characters will talk about and experience real-world struggles like government oppression through taxes, war, the vanity of humankind, the fight for power, and much more. I found this very interesting. Then the combat is another highlight, with a turn-based mixed with action approach, which keeps things very fluid. Your every action consumes this meter on the left, but successful attacks and defeating enemies gives you some extra time. There are ranged and melee attacks you can control directly with positioning and aiming. It works impressively well. I mean, yeah, this is a really great game. A bit on the easy side, but still. And that's another important thing to mention. The Xbox 360 version is significantly easier compared to the PlayStation 3 version of Eternal Sonata. That one leads to a much bigger necessity of grinding, which most will not see favorably nowadays, I believe. On the other hand, the PlayStation 3 version has differences in the story, one of them leading to two characters to become fully playable in the final part of the game, which is very meaningful. So the PlayStation 3 version is seen as more complete, even if many of the differences end up being a question of preference. But whatever version you decide, Eternal Sonata is a beautiful and great game and a must-play for RPG fans in my opinion. Luckily, there are physical versions available. Following up with one that has climbed in price a lot for its physical form, Fatal Inertia. This is a pretty solid futuristic racer, and this generation is sorely lacking on those. This is a combat-focused hover racer with an impressive variety of weapons to use against your opponents. Seriously, it has a lot of stuff, and most can be used in two ways, either by pressing L1 or R1. Magnets and smoke bombs can be thrown ahead or behind. Rockets and pulse bombs can also be thrown or used on yourself as a boost. Wires can be attached to enemies to pull them back, or to walls and rocks to pull yourself forward, and a lot more. It's pretty cool actually. The game controls very well, it's all pretty standard, except for the addition of a barrel roll to get rid of magnets, which is the most common weapon. I mean, yeah, this is not a masterpiece or anything, but a solid game for sure. Hope it gets a discount in one of these sales, cause the $19.99 price is a bit too high still, even though it's nowhere near the physical prices nowadays. Moving on to one of the bigger games on the list that also suffered the underrated fate, Singularity. This is a pretty great first-person shooter. It's from the same makers of one of many Wolfenstein reboots, which is the one in this generation of consoles, but Singularity is even better than that in my opinion. There are many interesting ideas used in exciting and satisfying ways here. This is a first-person shooter with actual meaningful puzzle sections, object manipulation, time manipulation, gadgets that freeze enemies, the ability to catch and throw projectiles like rockets, bending trajectories of your bullets. I mean, it's awesome. There is so much stuff in this game, it's impressive, and everything well done. The only reason I can think of why this wasn't a major success was the oversaturation in the market with first-person shooters. That's it. Problem right now is that the game is stuck in this generation, except for PCs, and it's expensive digitally for $29.99. So it would be great if this got a discount in these final months of the 360 marketplace lifecycle. Okay, this is insane. It may look like a top-down racer at first glance, but it's really not that. This is one of the craziest ideas for a game offering immense amounts of fun. This is Burnout CRASH. This game, what a cool and unique concept. How they looked at traffic intersection crashes and decided to make a whole game around it is completely beyond me, and it totally translates to an enjoyable gameplay like nothing else. It may sound too shallow, but it's not. This is how it works. You drive in for a couple of blocks into the intersection, then crash into the first vehicle you see. You immediately lose the ability to continue to drive your car after that. But fret not, there is plenty of meaningful gameplay left here, because your vehicle is equipped with explosives, of course, so you can choose the moment when to set them off. Ideally, when some vehicle that would otherwise escape the collision is passing you by. Then chain reactions of explosions may occur, but more importantly, as you explode, your car is launched into the air and you gain control over it again, so you can guide it to fall into even more vehicles. It's awesome. You can unlock several different cars, and some will allow you to move more when airborne, which is cool. Then more chain reactions will happen, and after enough damage is caused, you can explode again, then rinse and repeat. Until you thought it was over. Oh, no way. The best is yet to come. You keep causing mayhem and you get special feature events to happen. From a gas truck driving into the fun, to emergency airplane landings, tornadoes, and goddamn meteor showers. It's so cool. The game will ask you to cause damage to nearby buildings, cause stuff to fall into sinkholes, and a whole lot more as ways to diversify the missions, and the intersections get more complicated to manage too. Great game, Burnout CRASH, loads of fun. It has very limited availability, and it's definitely worth the already cheap asking price of $4.99. Check this one out. Next is a game that some people really hate, so I was skeptical of it, but I tried it and there is definitely something interesting here. But not for the gamer that the visuals of the game appeal to. I'll explain. We're talking about Lucidity. This game has beautiful graphics, the story is also interesting and well presented, everyone agrees there, but the gameplay is where people had problems. The gameplay here is chaotic. It's similar to Mario vs Donkey Kong in gameplay concept. The girl walks automatically and you place objects that make her do different things. There are many objects with different effects. The problem is that she moves way too fast to give you any time to prepare. So different to most games of this kind, there is no planning involved simply because there is no time for that. It's all about reacting fast and using whatever one of the two immediately available items you have to successfully avoid the next incoming hazard that is mere seconds away. This becomes a very difficult task very early in the game, especially because some of the objects, like the slingshot, make the girl move even faster. All that said, I swear to God, I found the gameplay very engaging and fun, and I think I figured out what kind of gamer this is for and why it missed the mark. This game looks like a chill 2D platformer, but the gameplay is more similar similar to a Tetris gameplay, because you have to be constantly adapting to an unpredictable sequence of objects and there is little room for mistakes. If you like that kind of challenge, this is pretty cool. It's super satisfying to get the girl through a relentless sequence of pits and enemies, especially when you use the items in completely unusual ways, which this game allows for. There's actually a pretty well made programming behind all this, because she reacts to the objects even when you place them on top of her. So if you insist in the trial and error loop, you will figure out some pretty cool solutions and how to use each object to optimize your success rate, just like Tetris. So yeah, we have ourselves a real deceitful game here, but great if you're the right audience for it. Lucidity is only on Steam other than the 360, where people have been more positive about it as time goes on. Following up with Space Invaders Extreme. This is pretty awesome. This generation saw a number of classic arcade titles successfully modernized while also keeping their core ideas, which is much easier said than done. That was the case for Pac-Man Championship Edition and Galaga Legions, among others, and it's also true for Space Invaders here. This keeps the traditional static screen with aliens coming in from above, and if they reach the bottom, you lose a life. So you gotta take care of the first rows before worrying about the farther invaders, which remains a pretty cool gameplay concept. It also keeps the graphics very retro, but it modernizes the gameplay in pretty satisfying ways. The waves are super dynamic, you gotta defeat enemies of the same color 4 in a row to get a very short lasting but quite devastating power up based on the color. There are boss fights which are pretty cool, special bonus stages if you defeat the UFOs that pass by faster, and a lot of neat little details like enemies with mirrors that deflect your shots, enemy projectiles splitting into smaller projectiles if you shoot them, and a lot more. So it's clear they put a lot of work here to make it modern and more dynamic while still keeping the Space Invader concept intact. Solid game for sure, and very limited availability for it in terms of modern systems. Moving on to Tornado Outbreak. This is definitely a hidden gem. The game is pretty well made, with some surprising production value, but somehow at the same time having an overall budget feel. It's hard to explain. The game is all voiced over, and pretty great voiceover actually, but menus and many presentation aspects like cutscenes and transitions feel a bit on the budget side. Nothing too bad though, and the gameplay is pretty great. This is actually similar to Katamari games. You're a tornado and have to destroy and consume more and more to increase in size in order to be able to swallow up bigger things. There is much more than that though. Some pretty interesting ideas actually. There are these fire guys hidden under objects which you must find, and there's a whole gameplay mechanism around that where you can chain them together and consume all at once. Once you start a chain, your tornado gets slower though, so you need to find the next one fast. The bigger the chain gets, the more time you add to your timer limit. There are also sequences where you have to avoid the sunlight, and a lot more interesting gameplay surprises as well. Pretty neat game, not anything to scoff at here, despite a few shortcomings in the presentation. So do check it out, Tornado Outbreak. Moving on to a obscure, 100% exclusive to the 360 and rather interesting falling blocks puzzler called TiQal. This kind of game was not what people were looking for during this generation, I feel like, which is a shame because it's a great one of these. In TiQal, the objective is to drop the shapes so you can form squares of the same color. Once you do, you have a small time to increase it by adding more blocks of the same color. If you're fast, you can even have 2 different sets of different colors at the same time. By doing that successfully, a bunch of different power-ups will float up and you have to catch them manually to activate. The effects vary, like giving you a powerful blast, removing all blocks of a given color, and several more. As time passes, the puzzle will continue adding more rows and you gotta avoid the blocks from reaching the line up there. And that's it. The game is long and full of stages and it's pretty fun though, nothing groundbreaking. Just a solid block dropping puzzler for fans, nothing wrong with that. Moving on to probably the hardest one to sell on the list, Vigilante 8 Arcade. Okay, this is definitely not for everyone. It's a remake of the original from the PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64, and this kind of gameplay may feel shallow for some. I think it would be hard to convince newer generations to like this game, but if you are an old school gamer, this has a lot to offer. This is 100% a vehicular combat game. Each stage is a big sandbox arena with scattered items and a few opponents trying to destroy each other. I don't think the graphics have aged very well here, and it gives off some sense of jank in the beginning, but dude, it's so much destruction awesomeness here. You have no idea. There is a constant need to move around to avoid opponent missiles and such, as well as to collect weapons to use against them, because you run out of ammo for the more powerful ones, and to find the invaluable but much more difficult to reach repair kits. So that need to keep moving around keeps things dynamic, which in turn makes room for the level design to shine. Seriously, I was blown away when in the middle of the combat mayhem, this happened. Yeah, an avalanche. And there are lots of environmental hazards like that. It's pretty cool, but admittedly, the game doesn't have a lot more than that to offer. Each character has a tiny campaign to clear, so you'll want to play with all of them, and it may get repetitive. So like I said, this is a hard one to sell. Hope there are some fellow old school people out there who can appreciate this one. And next is the unbelievable The Fancy Pants Adventures. This is the compilation of the originally browser-based Flash games Fancy Pants Worlds 1 through 3. These got some pretty great traction back in the day, but I believe the console audiences remained largely unaware of this series. And that's kinda tragic, cause this is sick. The handmade graphics may be basic, but a closer look reveals some intricate and outstanding work done here, especially in the animations coupled with the physics of the game. Remarkable. You can do some awesome stuff here, like backwards jumping, running all the way around loops, and a lot of momentum-based mechanics too, similar to Sonic, and the level design complements the gameplay very well. There is so much to find, with some collectibles posing a real platforming challenge. Later you also unlock a weapon, which adds a whole lot more to do. Fancy Pants is awesome, and this is the only generation that saw a console release of it, so do consider grabbing it on the 360 before it's gone, especially if you're a physics-based platforming fan. Now we have a few more games on the bonus section. Here I'll more quickly than usual mention games that are more niche or that leave something to be desired quality-wise, but are still worth a mention. First we have Rush and Attack. This is a part of a NES title, also found on several old school PCs, and this is super fun but also very hard. This game is no joke. That's why I find it more niche nowadays. There is a strong need to think fast and hit buttons in a very precise timing to take care of enemies coming in from all sides, and even dodge projectiles at the same time, so it quickly becomes a tall challenge. But old school solid action platforming fun for sure. Quite a classic from Konami here. And I'm pretty sure they realized they had something worthwhile there, cause they tried reviving the franchise with Rush and Attack Ex-Patriot. Unfortunately, this is for sure the worst game in the entire list. It's ugly looking, repetitive in gameplay, and offers little in terms of thoughtful gameplay ideas. There is a stealth inclination that really doesn't amount to much, because the AI is stupid. You can get right in front of the enemy and then hide and he won't see you. It's kind of off-putting. But this title is more fun in the action with some cool combos, as well as in the exploration, which is quite fun. The stages are sprawling and huge, with lots of hidden paths and collectibles to find, and some of the boss fights are also pretty interesting. This got panned by reviews with scores below 5, and while I think it's underrated, it's not by a lot. I'd give it a 6. Still a very rough game. So maybe if it gets a 90% discount, it's worth a try. Then Boogie Bunnies is a puzzle bubble-like with one interesting addition. You can throw Boogie Bunnies into each other from the sides of the screen, which is a cool incremental idea to this kind of game, but still, that's it. This has little to offer, just a bunch of puzzle bubble-like stages. It gets really hard because it takes a bit too long to stack up the points you need to clear a stage, so it leads to some frustration. It's a solid game of this kind, only a bit bare bones and already a niche kind of game, so it's in the bonus section. Then we have Gauntlet 7 Sorrows. This game had a pretty ambitious goal initially, with intricate RPG mechanisms and especially deeper combat with combos, throwing abilities, need for ranged combat, and much more that would lead to mashing buttons not doing the player any good. But the publisher wanted the game to release sooner than the developer could hope to realize any of those things, so we ended up getting a pretty run-of-the-mill action dungeon crawler here, where mashing buttons does the job most of the time. It's a pity. But it's not a bad game, just kinda shallow, a bit too old-fashioned for its time, and much less than it could have been. Still worth a mention though. Moving on to Blade Kitten. Okay, this one is definitely rough around the edges, hence why it's in the bonus section, but this is a fun game, man. Definitely the best in the bonus section, that's for sure. It's a 2.5D side-scroller action platformer that I like much better as a platformer than an action game. The action feels wonky and too easy most of the time for my taste, but it's okay because it takes a backseat to the platforming on really big sprawling levels, full of hidden stuff to find, even hidden paths inside hidden paths, which I love. The platforming physics are really interesting. The main character can grab onto most walls and ceilings, she can do some pretty impressive acrobatics, and there are even mounted sections and a little helper guy who can grab some out of reach collectibles that you will need to keep an eye out for. Interesting game for sure that could use a lot more polish to become a great title, but it's still worth a play, especially if it ever goes on sale. Alright, that's it for now. Look forward to part 6B with more non-backwards compatible games. There are lots of remaining cool ones to talk about, as well as part 5B and C once they include more games in the sale that Xbox has already announced, don't forget about that. I'll also go back to part 4B and probably C with more DLCs, and I also plan on making videos on region-free Xbox 360 games, one for OG Xbox games, and another for Kinect games as well. So alright, I gotta go because that's a lot and I gotta run to do it all. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks to all of you who support the channel and keep it alive. Your names are on screen and I value your support so much, and I'll see you soon.